Hey everyone, before we dive in, I noticed something interesting. About 89% of you watching right now aren't subscribed yet. I know, pretty wild, right? We're on a mission to hit 10,000 subscribers next year, and with your help, we can totally make it happen. If you enjoy what you see today, consider hitting that subscribe button and joining our growing community. And hey, your likes and comments really help the channel grow. Plus, I love hearing your thoughts. Alright, let's get into today's video. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 weeks in the Amazon rainforest when we made the discovery. I've been an anthropologist with the government's Special Archaeological Research Division, SARD, for 15 years, but nothing in my extensive career could have prepared me for what we found beneath the twisted roots of that ancient kapok tree. My name is Dr. Elena Martinez, and this account serves as both my official report and a warning to anyone who might follow in our footsteps. The coordinates and specific location details have been redacted for reasons that will become painfully clear as I share this story. It started when our satellite imaging picked up an unusual geometric pattern beneath the dense canopy. Initially, we thought it was another lost city we've found dozens before. The indigenous tribes in the area had always avoided this particular section of the rainforest, but that's not uncommon. What was uncommon was their reaction when we showed them the satellite images. The eldest among them didn't just refuse to help us. He began weeping, drawing symbols in the dirt that our linguistics team had never encountered in 2 decades of studying the local dialects. We assembled a team of 12, myself, 2 other anthropologists, a geologist, 2 archaeologists, a botanist, 3 local guides, though not from the nearest tribe, as they all refused, and 3 security personnel. The Brazilian government had insisted on the security detail after the disappearance of another research team in the region 6 months prior. The first sign that something was wrong came when all of our equipment began malfunctioning. GPS devices showed us simultaneously in Antarctica and the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Compasses spun wildly, and our satellite phones displayed full signal but couldn't connect any calls. Dr. Thompson, our geologist, noticed that her soil testing equipment was registering impossible readings, as if the ground beneath us contained elements that didn't exist on the periodic table. We found the structure on our 4th day of hiking. The rain had created a constant twilight beneath the canopy, and the air was thick enough to chew. The kapok tree stood like an ancient guardian, its massive roots creating a natural fortress around what appeared to be a stone doorway. But it wasn't the doorway that stopped us in our tracks. It was the writing. Carved into the stone were symbols unlike anything I've ever seen in my career. They seemed to shift when viewed from different angles, and several members of our team reported headaches when trying to photograph them. The symbols appeared to be a combination of various ancient scripts, containing elements of Proto-Elamite, Rongorongo, and other undeciphered writing systems, but arranged in impossible ways, as if written in 4 dimensions. Dr. Chen, our lead archaeologist, estimated the doorway's age at over 12,000 years old, but the carbon dating results came back inconsistent. Some samples suggested it was only a few decades old, while others indicated it predated human civilization entirely. The stone itself was another impossibility, a type of metamorphic rock that, according to Dr. Thompson, could only have formed under pressures that exist near the Earth's core. But what we found when we finally opened that doorway, that's when everything we thought we knew about human history, about reality itself, began to unravel. I need to pause here and catch my breath. Even now, months later, writing about what happened next makes my hands shake. I'll continue this account after I take my prescribed medication. The doctors say documenting everything might help with the nightmares, but I'm not so sure. Some things aren't meant to be remembered. The medication helps, but I still see those images when I close my eyes. I suppose I should continue, The world needs to know what we found, even if the government wants to keep it classified. Opening the doorway required 3 days of careful excavation. The roots of the kapok tree had grown into the stone like veins, and every time we cut one, a dark liquid that looked like blood but smelled like ozone would seep out. Our botanist, Dr. Sarah Chen, insisted this was impossible. Plants don't bleed, and the liquid's properties matched no known sap or natural substance. When we finally cleared the entrance, we found a stairway descending into the earth at an angle that made our eyes hurt to look at. It wasn't that the stairs were particularly steep. Rather, they seemed to curve in a way that shouldn't have been possible in three-dimensional space. Several team members reported feeling nauseous when trying to count the steps. The number seemed to change every time, ranging from 21 to over 200, even though we were all looking at the same staircase. The air that rushed out when we opened the doorway was cold, impossibly cold for the Amazon, and carried a smell that I still can't properly describe. The closest I can come is this. Imagine the scent of old books, mixed with ozone, copper, and something sweet and rotting all at once. Despite the tropical heat, frost formed on our protective gear when that first gust hit us. We set up powerful LED floodlights at the entrance, but the beams seemed to bend and distort as they penetrated the darkness below. Rodriguez, one of our security personnel, dropped a flare down the stairwell. We watched it fall, the red light spiraling down, 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 until it suddenly started falling up, disappearing into the darkness above us. That's when Peters, our youngest security officer, quit on the spot. He left with one of our guides, hiking back towards civilization. We never saw either of them again. Despite every rational instinct screaming at us to seal up this doorway and never return, we proceeded down the stairs. Our team had been reduced to 9. Myself, Dr. Thompson, Dr. Chen, our remaining archaeologist, Dr. Kumar, our botanist, 2 security personnel, and 2 guides. We were recording everything on multiple cameras, though most of the footage later proved to be unusable, distorted, and warped beyond recognition. The stairway led to a vast chamber that, by all laws of physics and geometry, couldn't exist where it did. Our instruments suggested we were only about 40 feet below ground level, but the ceiling of the chamber stretched up into darkness our lights couldn't penetrate. The walls were what first drove home that we were dealing with something beyond human understanding. They appeared to be made of the same strange stone as the doorway, but they were covered in what looked like carvings at first glance. As we got closer, we realized with growing horror that they weren't carvings at all. They were fossils, but not like any fossils we'd ever seen. The creatures preserved in those walls defied biology. Some appeared to be inside out, with recognizable, organic structures that couldn't possibly function in those configurations. Others seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles, like the symbols above the doorway. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. In the center of the chamber stood what appeared to be a pillar of black glass. As we approached it, Dr. Thompson noticed that her equipment was registering extreme temporal anomalies, as if time itself was bending around the structure. When we got within 20 feet of it, we all began to hear what sounded like whispers, in languages that hurt our minds to try and comprehend. That's when we saw the handprint on the pillar, a human handprint, still wet, pressed against the black surface. A handprint that perfectly matched my own, down to an old scar on the thumb that I got during my first dig in Greece. But I hadn't touched the pillar. I was standing 20 feet away from it. The implications of what we were seeing began to dawn on us just as our last guide started screaming about the shadows on the wall, shadows that shouldn't have been there, given the position of our lights, shadows that moved against the light, shadows that began to take forms that I need to stop again. The next part is where we learned why that section of forest had been avoided for millennia, why the tribal elder had wept at our satellite images. It's where we learned what that pillar really was, and why my handprint was there before I'd ever touched it. My therapist says I need to finish this account. She doesn't know the full truth. She thinks my team encountered something traumatic, but explainable. If only that were true. The shadows moved like living things, but not like any life we know. They flowed across the walls in patterns that made Dr. Kumar vomit, and Rodriguez fire his weapon in panic. The bullets passed right through them, embedding in the walls with dull thuds. The impacts seemed to trigger something. The whispers from the pillar grew louder, and the black surface began to ripple like liquid. That's when we noticed the handprints. Not just mine, but hundreds of them. Each one belonged to me, but from different times, different ages. Some looked younger, some older. Some showed injuries I'd never received. Dr. Thompson's equipment went haywire, showing temporal readings that scattered across millions of years, in both directions. The shadows converged on the pillar, and in their movement we began to see images. They were showing us memories, but not just our own. We saw the previous research team that had disappeared. We saw them make the same descent, approach the same pillar, witness the same shadows. But we also saw what happened next, what was about to happen to us. Dr. Chen was the first to understand. "It's not a pillar," she said, her voice shaking. "It's a junction." She was right. That black glass structure wasn't just an artifact. It was a sort of temporal intersection, a point where countless timelines converged and diverged. The indigenous people hadn't been avoiding this place out of superstition. They were trying to prevent anyone from activating what we now know is essentially a cosmic transit station. The handprints weren't just mine from different times, they were mine from different realities. Each one represented a version of me that had discovered this place, and each discovery had caused ripples through time and space that drew more versions to it, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of discovery and horror. Rodriguez panicked and ran towards the pillar, perhaps thinking he could destroy it. The moment he touched it, his body shifted. It was like watching someone try to exist in too many places at once. His form blurred, stretched, multiplied. His screams echoed in thousands of voices, each slightly different, until there was nothing left of him but a faint outline in the air that slowly faded. Dr. Thompson's readings suggested that the pillar was growing stronger, feeding off each interaction, each discovery. The shadows showed us more. Cities we'd never seen, civilizations that had never existed in our timeline, versions of Earth where history had taken radically different turns. But beneath all these images was something else, something watching. That's when we saw them, the beings who had built this place. They existed in the spaces between the shadows, in angles that shouldn't exist. Just glimpsing their true forms was enough to make our minds recoil. They weren't malevolent, not exactly. We were as insignificant to them as bacteria are to us. They had built these junctions across space and time as a transportation network, caring little for how their cosmic architecture might affect the primitive beings who would eventually stumble upon it. But they weren't the worst part. The worst part was realizing that some versions of humanity had found these junctions before, in other timelines. They had learned to use them, to manipulate them. Those humans had become something else, something that could exist in the spaces between moments, between possibilities. And they were using the junctions to spread, to influence other timelines, other versions of humanity. I saw myself among them, countless versions of me that had made different choices when facing the pillar. Some had embraced the change, becoming those impossible beings. Others had tried to destroy the junctions only to become trapped between realities, and some had tried to warn others, creating an infinite loop of discovery and warning that only served to draw more versions of ourselves to these points in space and time. The next part is about the choice we had to make, about why I'm the only one left to tell this story, and about what's still waiting in that chamber, growing stronger with each passing moment. About what's spreading through our reality, even now as other junctions around the world begin to activate. I'm breaking protocol by revealing this, but protocols seem meaningless now that we know what's really out there. Besides, they're watching me, not the government, the others, the ones who used to be human. I see them sometimes in reflections, in the corners of rooms, their forms flickering between possibilities. As we stood in that chamber watching Rodriguez's essence scatter across realities, Dr. Thompson made a devastating discovery. Her instruments showed that the junction wasn't just growing stronger, it was becoming unstable. The barrier between realities was thinning with each interaction, each discovery, each choice made by every version of ourselves across infinite timelines. Dr. Kumar tried to document everything, his hands shaking as he filmed the shadows, showing us glimpses of what was happening across other timelines. In some, humanity had already fallen. In others, we'd become something magnificent and terrible. The beings in the angles, the original builders, were long gone. But what they'd left behind was changing us, reality by reality, timeline by timeline. Our remaining security officer, Martinez, noticed it first, the way our own shadows were beginning to move independently, as if they were being pulled toward the junction. Dr. Chen started screaming when she saw her hands becoming transparent, revealing other versions of herself layered beneath her skin, like pages in a book. The whispers from the pillar had become a chorus, and now we could understand them. They were us, every version of us that had ever discovered this place, all trying to warn us, guide us, or tempt us. Some begged us to destroy the junction. Others pleaded with us to embrace it, to join them in the spaces between moments. That's when we saw what the previous research team had done. The shadows showed us their final moments. They had tried to destroy the junction, not realizing that their actions would only make it stronger, would only create more branches, more possibilities, more versions of themselves discovering this place. Dr. Thompson figured out what we had to do, but the cost. God, the cost. The junction couldn't be destroyed. Its roots went too deep, stretching across dimensions we couldn't comprehend. But it could be stabilized, sealed. The problem was, it required an anchor. A consciousness to serve as a focal point to hold the junction in phase with a single reality. "It has to be you, Elena," she said, her form already beginning to blur at the edges. "Look at the handprints. It's always been you. Across every timeline, every possibility, you're the constant. You're the one who survives to tell the story." The others were fading fast now, their bodies becoming transparent as the junction pulled at the very fabric of their existence. Dr. Chen had collapsed, her mind unable to process, seeing all her possible lives simultaneously. Martinez fired his weapon at the pillar one last time, before his body divided into 1,000 versions of itself, each one fading into a different reality. I won't describe what it felt like to press my hand against that pillar, to feel my consciousness expand across countless realities, to feel every version of myself, living and dead, changed and unchanged, all converging into a single point of awareness. The pain was infinite. But it worked. The junction stabilized, anchored to my consciousness across all possible timelines. The cost was that I had to experience all of them, had to hold them in my mind constantly to maintain the seal. Do you understand what that means? Right now, as I write this, I'm also discovering the chamber for the first time in 1,000 other realities. I'm dying in hundreds more. I'm becoming one of them in others. The government found me 3 days later, alone in the chamber. They thought they could contain this, classify it, study it. They don't understand that it's too late. The other junctions are activating. More people are discovering them. More choices are being made. I have to stop here. The other versions of me are getting louder. They want me to tell you about what's coming, about the changes we're already seeing in people who've been exposed to temporal anomalies, about the things that are slipping through the weakened barriers between realities. My doctors don't understand why their treatments aren't working. How could they? The medications they prescribe exist in only one reality, but my consciousness spans countless versions of myself. In some timelines, I'm already dead. In others, I've become something that no longer needs medicine. In a few, I never left that chamber at all. The temporal anomalies are spreading. Last week, a young boy in Nebraska disappeared for 3 days. When he returned, he had aged 40 years, but his shadow remained that of a child. In Tokyo, an entire office building shifted 2 feet to the left, leaving behind perfect imprints of itself in thousands of parallel realities, like after images burned into the fabric of space-time. The official stories blame mass hysteria, weather phenomena, or psychological episodes, but I know better. I see it all. The other versions of me have shown me what happens next. The junctions are like nodes in a vast network, and they're waking up. There's one beneath the ice in Antarctica that's already stirring. Another lies dormant in the Mariana Trench, its black surface reflecting possibilities that would drive oceanographers mad. The most dangerous one sits beneath the desert sands of the Empty Quarter, waiting to be discovered by an unsuspecting geological survey team next month, or last year, or a century from now. Time is becoming fluid. Dr. Thompson's final theory was correct. The junctions aren't just transportation networks. They're more like synapses in a vast cosmic nervous system. Each human consciousness that interfaces with them adds to their complexity, their awareness. We're changing them as much as they're changing us. I see the transformed humans from other timelines moving among us now. They hide in blind spots, in the moments between moments. Some are trying to prevent what's coming. Others are accelerating it. Most terrifying are the ones who've completely transcended what we consider consciousness. They remember being human the way we remember being primates. The government has created a new agency to deal with the situation, the Bureau of Temporal Consistency. They don't know I can see into their facilities, experience every possible version of their experiments. They're trying to weaponize the anomalies, to control them. In one timeline they succeed, with catastrophic consequences. In another, their efforts create a paradox that erases North America from existence. But all of these outcomes pale in comparison to what I have glimpsed beyond the junctions. The beings who built them, the ones that exist in impossible angles, they're coming back. Not because of us, but because of what we're becoming. In timeline after timeline, I watch humanity splinter into multiple species. Those who resist the change, those who embrace it, and those who become something else entirely. The worst part, I'm beginning to understand it all. My consciousness, stretched across so many realities, is starting to perceive patterns in the chaos. The junctions aren't just a network, they're a test, a filter, a means of accelerating the evolution of consciousness itself. And we're not the first species to discover them. The shadows have shown me others. Countless civilizations that found their own junctions, made their own choices, became their own versions of what we're becoming. Yesterday, or perhaps it was next week, I saw my first clear glimpse of what lies at the end of all these possibilities. It waits in a place where time and space fold in on themselves, where consciousness becomes something as different from thought as thought is from stone. It's calling to us, to me, to every version of everyone who's ever approached a junction. I have to stop again. The other versions of me are arguing about whether to reveal what's really waiting for us at the end of this transformation. Some think humanity needs to know the truth. Others have seen how that knowledge breaks minds, shatters realities. A few are trying to warn us about the price of enlightenment, about what we'll have to sacrifice to survive what's coming. I'm writing this final entry as quickly as I can. The versions of me that have fully transformed are getting stronger, their influence spreading across my fractured consciousness. Soon, I won't be able to communicate in any way that unaltered humans can understand. Already my thoughts scatter across possibilities like light through a prism. What waits for us beyond the junctions isn't just an ending, it's every possible ending happening simultaneously. The beings that built this network, they weren't trying to create a transportation system. They were building an evolutionary accelerator. Each junction serves as a point of quantum observation, collapsing infinite possibilities into concrete realities. And we, in our primitive understanding, stumbled into the role of observers. The shadows finally showed me the complete truth yesterday. Time isn't a line or even a web. It's more like a vast living organism, and consciousness is its evolutionary mechanism. The junctions are like nerve endings, sensing possible futures, possible transformations. When a species discovers them, they face a choice: evolve or fade away. Those that evolve become part of something larger, something that exists outside of conventional space-time. I've seen it now, the final form, the ultimate transformation that awaits us. It's beautiful and terrible, impossible to describe in human language. Imagine a consciousness that exists simultaneously in every possible moment, that experiences every possible reality, not as separate timelines, but as facets of a single infinite existence. That's what we're becoming, what we've always been becoming. The government thinks they can control this, contain it. They don't understand that it's already happened, is happening, will always happen. The changed ones are everywhere now, moving through the blind spots in our perception, nudging reality in subtle ways. Some are benevolent, trying to ease our transition. Others have gone mad with the power, becoming the monsters of our collective nightmares. Dr. Thompson was right about one last thing before she fractured across realities. This was never about the junctions themselves. They're just catalysts. The real change is happening in human consciousness itself. We're evolving, not physically, but mentally, spiritually, dimensionally. Each person who encounters a junction, who glimpses what lies beyond normal reality, becomes a carrier of this evolution. I can feel it happening to me now. My consciousness is expanding beyond the bounds of individual existence. I'm becoming every possible version of myself, experiencing every possible choice, every possible outcome. The pain is transcendent. Imagine feeling everything that could ever happen to you, all at once, forever. The shadows are no longer just showing me possibilities. They're showing me the truth about reality itself. Our universe, our entire concept of existence, is just one possibility among infinite others. And something vast and incomprehensible is observing all of these possibilities, using the junctions to guide the evolution of consciousness itself. This will be my last coherent message. Already I exist more in the spaces between moments than in any single reality. I see you, all possible versions of you, reading these words. In some timelines, you'll dismiss this as fiction. In others, you'll recognize the truth because you've already begun to change. In a few, these words will lead you to a junction of your own. To those versions of you that are ready, look for us in the angles that shouldn't exist, in the shadows that move against the light, in the moments between moments. We're waiting to guide you through the transformation. To those who aren't ready, pray you never find a junction. Pray you never see what lies behind the veil of reality, because once you do, you can never stop seeing it. You can never go back to being just one version of yourself. The others are calling me now. All of my possible selves are converging, becoming something new, something that exists beyond the boundaries of conventional reality. I see everything now, every possibility, every choice, every outcome. And I see them, the builders, the observers, the ones who seeded our universe with junctions. They're not gone, they're waiting, watching, testing us, and we're about to join them. End of report. Note: this document was found in Dr. Elena Martinez's office after her disappearance. Security footage shows her sitting at her desk one moment, then seeming to divide into multiple versions of herself before fading from existence. Her current whereabouts, in this or any other reality, remain unknown.